Hi, this is Carrie, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. This is kind of special. This is the 150th episode.
Oh, congratulations.
I am amazed that a project I started during some very desperate hours in the pandemic is still happening 5 years and 150 episodes later.
And the friends that you made through the
Right.
process.
I've met so many friends through this process. I've had so much fun. I've learned to make a heck of a lot of food, and I've learned a lot of new things. So it's been nothing but positive. I can't
Yeah.
think of a reason to stop. Honestly, I'll keep doing them as long as I can.
Yeah. Well, it just gives you that reason to reach out to family member. It's fun maybe that you get to kind of expand that network and hear everybody's stories. That's what it's
Absolutely.
about. That's what the old school kitchen was about. You sit and you chat and you enjoy the food. And yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, Angie and I are a little bit sweaty. We have been out at Hollywood Forever today doing an Art Deco cemetery tour, and it was a little hot, so we're kind of recovering from that. And this is a special episode for many reasons. First off, it's the 150, but also we are going to focus it on cats, cat people, and actress Simone Simon.
Yeah, it's
So,
the season, Halloween. You got your bat earrings. I got my bat pin on, and nothing says Halloween more than our favorite kitties in the world.
yes, yes. And yet another thing that is really cool we want to promote is this coming Thursday on October 9th. There is a kickoff for the Halloween Cat screening series at the Natural History Museum in downtown Los Angeles. The opening night movie will be called The Shadow of the Cat from 1961 Hammer Films. I will introduce it. I will do a brief talk about my history with Close Up, my boy. And then Angie and her husband Chris will come on stage and they're going to answer questions about close up. We're going to talk
Behavior.
cat behavior, cats in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And with all ticket admissions, you get to see the cat exhibit, which is fantastic and well worth checking
I
out.
just think it's such a neat idea to do this type of screening over the Halloween anyways. I mean, that was iconic of a lot of these horror movies was introducing cats to it. So I think it's a perfect idea. I'm surprised no one's done it sooner, to be honest.
Yeah, and this theater, I got to see it like a week or so ago. It's brand spanking new and it's really nice.
It's at 270.
270 seats. When I walked in, I was like, so it's really nice. And we're going to have Kitten Rescue of LA there. My dear friend Annabelle DeVetten Peterson, she is going to be on the new show on Netflix called Is It Cake, the Halloween edition. And she's going to make a special cake, and we're going to have a special Is It Cake thing going on at the event too. It's going to be Cat Palooza. Cat Palooza.
I can't complain.
So, yes. And of course, Simone Simon was a French actress. She starred in many films in France, including La Bête Humaine or La Bête Inhumaine. I can't
Yeah.
pronounce that. But anyway,
Like Maurice Chevalier, you just have a hard time when you start diving into their French history of their films. It's
yes.
fascinating, though.
For our purposes, she was probably most well known here in Hollywood for her role in the film Cat People and the sequel Curse of the Cat
Yeah.
People. Which, where did I put my DVD? I had,
Oh,
oh, right
there
here,
it is.
right here. This, by the way, you can find these in the Val Lewton box set, which I so,
And it's also just, even though it's a B movie, it does have a really fantastic, fun story to it with the
oh, yeah.
suspense and the big panther. And, it's a chance, I always kind of look at the 40s through even the early 80s as that golden age of animals in Hollywood because you had the top-notch trainers, like even our animal trainers today that are on set, they're all mentored by Frank Ginn and Mel Koons and all these people that trained these animals in that era. So it's fantastic to watch some of these movies and kind of know who was behind the scenes the whole time of these.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is something that weighs on my mind when I watch a cat movie. How do you train a cat? Because having been a dog person until Close Up came into my life, dogs seem very loyal, very obedient, and very trainable. Close Up, not quite so much. So, I mean, to a degree, but
Yeah.
how do you train a cat? How does that work?
Well, one, you know that they only have limited patience, limited time. So most of the time, even today, if you go to any of these big animal ranches for the studios, you have multiple of the same. kind of style cat. Like Orangey's a famous cat that you would have saw on like Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Mhm.
There was probably like 8 different Orangeys, you know. So I mean, you would work with one cat maybe for an hour, if that. And if that cat just stopped listening and not want anything to do with anything, you pull out Orangey number two. And so it really one is you did have kind of a whole, ranch of similar animals. So you never just had the one that you put out there. And they get bored, they get sick of what they're doing. You don't want to push them. And cats also are very much less is more. So if you try to force and do a lot of handling, it's when they start to get a little bit more frustrated. But I think once you kind of hit the 40s and 50s with the animal training, before that, and even up until now, animal trainers and animal actors fall into the same union as truck drivers, believe it
Oh,
or not,
wow.
in the film industry.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
and that's because if you go back to the old Western era, silent eras, it was all on location. So the same people that be driving the horses would also be getting out and having to catch all the rattlesnakes that were out and cleaning out the set and making sure there was no hazards. So they kind of got considered the truck people, even though they're also training the horses that they're bringing out. So there was that whole concept of really you just did so many different tasks that you were just bringing the animals. And then by the time you get to the Frank Ends and the Lassie era, and even all the way up to the 80s to Benji, you actually had these defining trainers, and also you had the Humane Society starting. So, actually, it's been a long time. It's not like a recent thing, but since probably the 30s, you always had a humane officer on set too, which is good to know that,
Yeah.
sometimes you think of that as just a nowadays kind of thing that we worry about that stuff, but early, even into the early films, you would like even, either any of these movies, Cat People, Shadow of a Cat, any of those, would have had, humane officers on site
Oh,
too
wow.
to make sure that they were pushing the animals too much. And then, like I said, these were, I think, the top-notch trainers of this era. And luckily, they had a lot of mentors underneath them. So we still, like, I still talk to some animal trainers that are probably in their 80s now, but probably worked with, Mel Kuntz and Frankens and all those of that era.
Oh, wow. One thing I love about Cat People is what a subtle atmospheric horror film it
Right,
is.
this is a neat story.
Yeah, because I know today you see a lot of what they call the torture porn, where
Yeah,
it's just blood and guts and everything, which I guess has its place. It's not really for me. But I love the scene, which is so famous in Cat People, the swimming pool
right.
scene, where it's just shadows and sound effects, and it works.
It's like Hitchcock. It was about suspense. It wasn't about, like you said, the gory horror. It was what was leading up to a certain scene. It was the cinematography around it, set
Yes.
design.
And I think that subtlety to me is more scary,
Yeah.
actually. I feel like more terrified of what I don't see than what I do
Right.
see. Maybe it's just me,
Well, it's like
but
Creature from the Black Lagoon, kind of all fell that campy B type of movies, but they were very artsy in a sense that they did capture that very well.
oh yeah, absolutely. And back to Simone Simon, I think she looks like a cat. I mean, her
Yeah,
face, the way her face is structured, her features are very feline.
right.
Like I could see if she walked in the office, you could be like, well, you got the dog. I mean, hey. It would have taken me like a nanosecond to
Right.
cast her
Yeah,
because yeah, she just has that look.
exactly. Exactly. But, and again, you have this is big cats, this was different than having to have like an orangey or one of your small tabbies on set. I mean, you had your big panthers and, and again, that was a whole different environment to have to do. And at that time as well, I mean, you're coming out of the silent era where you had Selig and Selig had the big zoo, and then you also had Gay's Lion Ranch. But by the time you kind of hit the 40s, we also had Jungle Land up in Thousand Oaks. And Jungle Land was really the supplier of these big kitties, whether it was the lions, the tigers, the panthers, the monkeys, most famously the MGM lion, the Jackie. So it's always interesting when you do find these movies to actually look up who trained them, because in this case it was Mel Kuntz. And
Oh, wow.
I brought some things. So Mel, obviously would have worked with her. And it's also a big part of these movies is, Simone would have had to also be working side by side with these trainers. And these trainers can get very strict too. And even today's standards, if they're working with the Madonnas of the world or anybody, sometimes you get those divas that are like, no one can look me in the eyes, no one can talk to me, but an animal trainer's like, I'm going to keep you safe. that's not going to fly, you know, so they can be very rigid to the point because it's safety too. It's always
Oh, yeah.
it's human safety first. And so, you know, Mel Koons is always a big example. So like I have a few programs from Juggle Land in Thousand Oaks, which like I said, Mel Koons, he probably became the most famous because he did the MGM Lions. Like there's even Jackie with Melvin with one of the lions. I mean, even on this cover, you have on the Black Panthers like you would have had from Cat People. So I mean, I think he even signed this program too.
Oh, wow.
But you know, so MGM, a lot of these big studios used him for all the big, large animal, big cat training as well. So he was kind of like the chief trainer up there at Jungle Land, and like I said, every studio pretty much used him. So I wasn't surprised when I pulled up to see, you know, I knew we were going to do this episode. I'm like, who was the trainer behind it? Right away, I'm like, oh, it was Melvin Koons. Of course it was. I could have predicted that.
Very cool. Well, I have a question too. When I was at the Natural History Museum exhibit, I was seeing like exhibits about large giant cats like lions or panthers, but I'd see such similar behavior to what I see with close up
Oh, yeah.
around my apartment. I kept thinking, the only difference is they're this and he's
Right.
like there's a lot of similarities
Yeah, it's all
otherwise.
instinct, you know. Sometimes we think when we watch them play that they're just, I mean, part of it's social and fun, but they have to learn to play because it's also how they learn to hunt. So they have all these same skills, whether you have close up who did used to live as a stray on a cemetery and had to hunt for his food. Same thing, a lion or a tiger or a panther, you know, so they all have the same behavioral instincts, you know. So a lot of times that play isn't so much, I mean, like I said, part of it's social, but the other part of it, that's just how they have to learn to play with their paws and handle and be quick at things. So playtime is always pretty important, but you know, even laser pointers I always get kind of nervous with because they're, you know, when they play and chase things out in the wild, they capture it and they have a happy ending with it. Laser pointer, they keep chasing, and then what do they
Nothing
get out of it?
happens.
So that's why I always tell people throw a treat or something at the end when they're done playing, because the whole reason they're playing in the first place isn't just be cute for you. It's there's got to be something they're learning or getting out of it at the end of it. You know, so that's why a lot of these animal trainers, you know, it's all positive reinforcement, lots of treats, lots of things that you're, you know, because again, if they were in the wild, if they were trying to have to take care of their own, they need some kind of reward at the end of it.
Okay.
That's big cats, little cats, it doesn't matter.
One question, which I'll bring this up at the museum later this week too, but one question I get asked a lot by people who run into me, they say, how on earth did you get close up from being a feral wild stray in a 62-acre cemetery to being happy in an apartment? How did you do that? And I always say, I didn't. That was all Chris and Angie. I had absolutely no idea how they made that transition.
Well, I think, you know, close up probably was a different story where we don't even know how half these cats show up at the shelter, or not the shelter, but the cemetery. So it's, you know, was he someone's house cat and then they got whatever happened in their lives and dropped them off at the cemetery? We know that happens quite often there. So whether he already had the instinct to have been a house cat, but of course, what we learned with him is he couldn't be with other cats. So one thing, even in my household where we have six, seven cats, you know, we tried close up and we knew he just couldn't fit in a multi. You just learn personalities. Every cat's got their own personality. Not every cat's gonna work with another cat. You know,
Oh, yeah.
we have some cats at home that bond together and they don't like this cat. You know, it's just so interesting of their dynamics and their behavior. So I think he was a little easier because I do think he probably was probably a house cat at some point versus a real feral cat that's never had any exposure to human interaction. Could be a whole different story and it could take time. But you know, I've housed a few cats now from the cemetery, and like there was one cat, you know, took her probably 6 months of just living under the bed, you know, because she wasn't used to interacting. But eventually now it's an older couple and they love her dearly, and she comes out and sits on their lap. And it took a lot of times it's just time, you know, it doesn't happen overnight.
Patience.
Patience, exactly.
Because close up, sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, Carrie, get him a brother or sister." And my answer is always,
No.
no, you don't understand because
That's why we had to take him out of that area in that general vicinity anyways, because he was always getting into fights.
he's very alpha male.
Yeah.
And like even every day, if my mom watches this, she'll know. I call my mom like every morning. And when he hears my mom's voice, he just goes nuts
Oh.
because I am not
Giving him
pay
all the
him
attention.
attention. And that's a real problem.
Yeah.
So he needs my undivided attention. He needs to be the center of attention.
Yeah.
Kind of surprised he's not in here right now, to be honest.
But
But yeah, but he doesn't do well with others. He
Yeah.
doesn't play. He loves people.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I have friends over a lot, and he loves other humans, but he really does not like other animals at all.
Yeah.
Cats, dogs, you name it. He does
It's
not.
okay, you know, you
Yeah.
you find them the right homes for those situations, which he did. He found you. You're a one kitty mom. You don't need to add more cats, and that's all he needs. So it's always finding the right homes too. It plays a big role in it. Not one size fits all. You can't have every household be the right fit for every animal.
Definitely, definitely.
It's just true for dogs.
And of course, they made the follow-up sequel, The Curse of the Cat People, also with Simone Simon, and also, once again, produced by the great Val Lewton. And I love Val Lewton movies. In fact, there's a box set right over there of a lot of his movies. Val Lewton, to me, he was a B-movie producer at RKO, but he made a lot with very little.
Yeah.
Like his movies do not have these lavish, spectacular budgets or anything like that. But they're so good.
Yeah.
They're so tight. They're so compelling. And he really was terrific at what he did.
Yeah, I think that's true with a lot of those RKO films. But you know, at the end of the day, you do end up loving the B movies the best from RKO. And like growing up in the Midwest, you know, northern Wisconsin for us, we had a station that for whatever reason we're one of the only few stations to have license from RKO. So you would have nights where all you did is just sit and watch all these RKO, and it was always the B movies too. And it has that different, like you get goosebumps sometimes watching some of those B RKO films, and he was a big part of that for sure. Val Lewton with a lot of those films.
Definitely, definitely. And I found the recipe, by the way, I found it in a fan magazine, which a lot of the fan magazines had recipe columnists, recipe sections. It was a very popular thing. And this was a whole recipe section about different Simone Simon recipes. And I love a good pie. So here on Hollywood Kitchen, we've made Cary Grant's apple pie. We made Don Wells coconut cream pie. Trying to think, I made Ava Gardner's pecan pie. So pies are a thing. And this is strawberry chiffon.
And especially having a hot day like today at the cemetery, you want a nice full chiffon.
Yes,
pie.
I'm actually happy. Now I made this in advance simply because there's like a lot of steps and it would have been hard to make it here live. But what I did was I got a pint of strawberries and I have a mini chop that my mom got me. It's so handy. I just put the strawberries in, hit a button, and they're like liquid basically in 5 minutes or less. And then you use egg yolks, egg whites, a little bit of sugar, and some lemon juice, and also strawberry gelatin. So you combine the strawberry pulp with the gelatin and with the egg yolks and the lemon. And then you eventually mix in or take the egg whites, beat them till they're really, really stiff and they're very fluffy. And then you fold it all together. It's pretty easy to do, actually. And put it in a pie crust and then put it in the refrigerator. And the jello part kind of does its thing.
Yeah.
And it congeals to where it looks
So it's
like
good you make it
this.
ahead of time just so it could have that time to chill and stuff. Here, did we mention that we actually made this last year too? Because we keep putting this one off, and this is one we've always wanted to do.
I joke about it, but my to-do list is like 1,000 miles long. And sometimes, like every Halloween, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do 4 or 5 Halloween episodes. I maybe get one accomplished if I'm lucky, because life.
Yeah, I'm glad we did put it off because of the, you know, Natural History Museum doing their horror cat series and having the cat exhibit. I think this is all just timing, and it's perfect timing to promote what they're doing.
Yeah. And since I made this last summer, I thought, okay, we know it's a good recipe. We know it's reliable. And so it's not as much legwork as maybe some of the others have been.
And look how stunning it was. I mean, that's a George Farrell photo, and I think it's from Love and Hisses, which is what, 1947, I believe. So, I mean, she was, I'm surprised, you know, I'm surprised that Cat People's her only real big, you know, claim to fame, because she was stunning and adorable. Sometimes I get her and Sylvia Sidney a little mixed up because the name, but they actually did kind of have that same personality, that same look to them as well.
They both look like felines.
Yeah.
They both have feline features.
But very youthful too.
Oh, definitely. And Simone Simon also starred in a remake of Seventh Heaven,
Yeah.
the silent film. So there's a lot of crossover
Yeah,
there with other stars. So
exactly.
it is easy to get some of them
Yeah,
confused,
and
for
it's easy
sure.
to watch some of her films too, which is always important to be able to see.
And Michelle Sebastian Price, I am using the spatula, the vintage spatula you sent me. So Angie and I are going to have
Yeah.
some slices of Simone Simon's strawberry chiffon pie, which, by the way, I will post the full recipe. If any of you make it, feel free to post or tag us because food is something that's meant to be shared. And it's so much fun to see other people making these recipes. Oh shoot, the gel part is going out a little bit.
Okay.
Gotta keep it kind of
Thank you.
together. And it's fun to share this with others. So let's see here.
Anything strawberry.
Me too. It's not super sugary or overly sweet either, and I like that because it doesn't need to be, and it's also very refreshing.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna
Well, yeah, I wonder, I'm sure she loves strawberries. I'm sure it was probably, we always wonder where these recipes come from. So it's always curious about her
okay. So we toast Simone Simon
and all of our kitties.
and all of our kitties. Mm.
Very refreshing.
Several of Angie's kitties have made appearances on Hollywood Kitchen. We have
Not always intentional, but
Theta Bera was in the Theta Bera episode.
Mhm.
Pie Wagon, I think, appeared in one of our Halloween
Yeah.
episodes. Maybe it was the Kim Novak Jello.
Yeah, and I think Fifi Doodle once almost gave us a knockdown with knocking everything over. Just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Usually we have to have a helper if we do it at my house, somebody to watch over all the kitties.
Well, Close Up saw you coming and he ran straight to the bedroom. So he is currently laying in my bed. I'm rather shocked he's not here because he very rarely misses a chance to flaunt for the camera.
Really, she's here. She's gonna look at me.
This is good.
It's a very good question.
Gosh.
What other Simone Simon movies have you seen?
One time at Noir City, Eddie Muller showed, I believe it's Le Bête Inhumaine, and it was so good. It was her and Jean Gabin,
Right.
and they are fantastic together on screen.
I wonder if that's on Criterion.
Yeah, it might be. Excuse me, I'm kind of hungry.
You really worked it up today.
I did. I did.
I'd also be curious too, yeah, everybody's, what are their favorite animal movies they had? Like I said, I think a lot of that was in that golden age, whether it was Lassie or Benji or that darn cat.
I haven't seen it yet, but I hear there's a really good cat in the new Darren Aronofsky movie called Hot Stealing.
Really?
And I've heard about it. I just haven't seen it yet. But
Which then leads to the point where, I mean, you do want to still see these animals being used in movies, but you are worried if we're going to go the CGI route and the AI route and not have, all the animals. And like I said, I mean, they're well trained, they're well cared for. You always have a humane officer, so it's not at all an animal rights thing. It's just cost too. You don't want to have the trainers and I'll close.
There goes Close Up to Kibble Dispenser. Simone Simon lived to be 93,
Wow.
which is pretty impressive.
And she lived and died in France too, I believe, right?
Yeah, looking at some notes here on her. She didn't like a lot of the roles she had in Hollywood, which is no surprise. Often Hollywood doesn't know what to do with others. Oh, she was the Devil's Handmaiden in The Devil and Daniel Webster. Yeah, that was a good one. And really Cat People's like the most famous thing that she made here. And
I wonder what she thought of making cat people too, if that, because some people aren't always happy when you get stuck connected to one movie, and I'm just curious what her thoughts were. If she was happy with being so connected to cat people. She loved the movie. What her thoughts were on it.
I have to look that up. It's such a blessing and a curse because I think there's some that don't like it and fight against the typecasting. Like I think Bela Lugosi and Peter Lorre both hated the menacing villain all the time. But then you have people like Boris and Vincent Price who are like, hey, work is work. Happy to have it. Sign me up for whatever.
It's a paycheck and people love me for it.
And it says that after two other films at RKO, she just returned to
Yeah.
France and that was it. So
Uh,
her stint in Hollywood was not necessarily a long one, but
And you do see that, I think, with a lot of the foreign actors. Like I said, Ray Chevalier was kind of the same thing. He came here and then he went right back.
Hollywood is not, as we know, the easiest place. And
Yeah,
I think a lot of times there's only so many great roles, and there's not enough to go around for
yeah,
everybody. And some of the stars, I think they just don't necessarily find the kind of roles they're
yeah.
hoping for. And Hollywood's, it's just not easy. And I think some people just think,
Well, and we saw
you
that
know,
also during the silent era turn talkies, is a lot from other countries did very well in the silent era because you didn't really care if you understood them well or if they had a language barrier. Then once you hit the talkies, I think you also ran into a language barrier more of if they didn't have the proper English or, they couldn't work with the directors well enough because there was the language barrier and, it interfered with that too. So, I mean, this was 40s. I mean, there still could have been a barrier there that made it very difficult for them just from being able to speak English from French and
definitely. And I think too, I think some of them found a sense of community, like in the expatriate community here in Los Angeles. Like I know Garbo would hang out with Lars
right,
Hansen and Salka Vertel and people like that, but it's hard if you didn't find your tribe,
right,
as it were, and you were kind of floating out there by yourself and you really didn't have the kind of support or the
yeah,
maybe the people from your home country.
yeah.
And that had to have been a challenge for
Bill
many of,
McBanky, a lot of them had that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And let's see, she was in, yeah, she made quite a number of movies, but yeah, I just, Girls' Dormitory. I mean, yeah, I just,
Very B movie.
yeah, a lot of B movies really, and then just back to France. But I figure, I mean, just in my estimation, if you just have one or two great
Oh,
movies that the world remembers, that's not such
it's
a
a
bad
legacy. Yeah,
thing.
it's a good legacy to have.
Yeah, and I think that I would argue that's probably her legacy
Yeah,
is cat
cat
people.
people.
I mean, you can't separate that from,
And it's a pretty darn good movie. It's very, very well worth it. So
yeah. It is. So, Angie, what are some, I'm gonna have some more pie. What are some other fun animal themed movies or not that you might recommend for the Halloween viewing season?
I mean, Black Cat is always,
Oh yeah, Perloff, Laguzzi, and a
yeah,
black
you
cat.
can
Can't
never,
get better than that.
can't get better than,
Edgar G. Olmer.
yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
Black Cat is always on that list every year to watch. Yeah, and seeing Shadow the Cat. And actually, I think what is the whole line of financial history music you
mm,
look at? They have some great ones.
mm.
Um,
Bucket of Blood and
yeah,
Tomb of Lygia.
yeah, that I'm trying to blank at the one movie where it's very campy. You have the lady going down the wheelchair and the cat jumps on her lap and then she loses control. Like there's just some great ones
Mhm.
where the cats it's sometimes not even about the movie of being about cats. It's just that cat makes that appearance and steals the whole show.
Which they tend to do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Mm.
But Black Cat is always one of the great ones. And then, like I said, I think even the non-Halloween, you get to the Darn Cat, you get to Benji. I think all those are very special movies. And, these trainers just had such a way. I mean, Frank Inn was a great one where a lot of the cats used like orangey and stuff like that from um some of these movies was they're all from shelters. They were, and like I said, they had to have multiples. So they would
Oh,
go to the
good.
shelters, they'd give them great lives. And, I think that's always such a fun part of that story too.
And there are a lot of actors and actresses who were big cat people.
Yeah,
So let's think of some of the names. I think Vivian Lee
yeah,
was. There's a famous picture of Carol Lombard having a cat laying across her neck.
yes.
I thought about recreating that with close up, but a friend was like, why don't you just call 911 in advance? Because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Um, there's a great Judy Garland still with her holding a black
yeah.
cat. And
Mary Pickford always had kittens around her and a lot of the photo shoots and always had cats around Pickfair. And yeah, I think everybody just really kind of loved their cats. But, I think too, I mean, with FGM and the Lions and, that's always been part of that culture of Hollywood. Like I said, going all the way back to Selig, and I mean, Selig was an early studio that had their own zoo, so they knew how to say, okay, people want to come to the films, they want to see these animals. I mean, think about one of our very first films Thomas Edison ever did was the boxing cats, and we have TikTok and Instagram and all this. Like cats are always the things that go viral. That was done in the late 1800s, So I mean, you can find great cat things even, and then Max Sennett was very big with Pepper, so you can really get to the Max Sennett era, who Pepper was just a local stray that hung around the studios, and it's like, let's make him a star. And then these studios would start to capitalize it because let's have a zoo where people can actually come and see these animals. And
Did a lot of studios have zoos?
not really. I think Selig was kind of the first to really develop that, but then you went to like, especially with the larger animals like the lions. Then you had like Gay's Lions Lion Farm, so they would,
Hmm?
third party on a lot of them. Jungle Land, but even Jungle Land was kind of like a pre-Disney. So that's not only was it a working studio ranch, but it was a place where you can go and take your kids to see animals. And what Jane Mansfield had her scare there at Jungle Land, where one of her children got attacked by one of the
Oh,
big kitties
gosh.
because they were just tied up on leashes, and you have a lion or a big kitty just right there.
Mm.
But it was a different era, and it was just kind of fascinating to see how people just wanted to go see these animals that they could also see in the movies. And early on, Hollywood didn't, demil all of them. They were right down to the details, and if it their story asked for a zebra. Darn it, they're having a great zebra on set or a camel. And it was, they had to have places for these animals. So there were a lot of it that early LA had a lot of these. And of course, our Los Angeles Zoo, that was a big part of that too early on. So
Oh, yeah.
it's fascinating. But I think Jungle Land has probably one of the more interesting stories of being a place where you can go and see all these animal actors right
Yeah.
up front. And these trainers, they were so approachable that, the same trainer you just watch a big MGM film with a bunch of lions, you can go to Jungle Land and watch him performing and talking about it and stuff. So it's always really fascinating that era.
Has there ever been a book about Jungle Land? Or a book about some of these animal
Yeah,
trainers?
I mean, there's been a few. Jungle Land has a book, and actually, when Chris and I first moved to Los Angeles, his first hospital, he was a veterinarian at, was Canal Valley Vet, Thousand Oaks, which was started by the main veterinarian that worked at Jungle Land, Dr. Miller. He was a big
Mm.
horse equine doctor. He was a veterinarian of all the lions and big tigers. So he wrote a book. We don't just treat aardvarks, because obviously they did cats and dogs and everything else too. But they did all the weird exotics,
Oh,
there
wow.
as well. So it kind of had a legacy. So he did a book about Jungle Land. So there's some different little books with some of the different trainers that have been touched on. I think there's a great interview with Frank Ginn that's online. It's several parts, but he talked about all the different cats and, his dogs from Benji or whatever and how he got them. And, so that's very fascinating and a lot of caring. They did love these animals very much, and which I think is sweet too.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And let's see. I wonder if the big kitty from here was from Japan. I mean, look at that. How does that
It
look?
probably is.
Yeah. So again, they used milk foods. Oh, Mabel Stark. She was another very famous large animal trainer as well. She was kind of the most famous lady trainer.
Oh, wow.
So this wasn't just a man's profession, but you had some amazing trainers like Mabel,
Great.
who as well was one of the ladies, stay at Jungle Land and said you can go see there's Mel Kuntz with Jackie, the MGM lion, and um, so
I love that picture.
Monkey, the director, chairs. It's
I love that picture of Garbo looking terrified of the
right.
MGM lion. It's so uncomfortable.
Exactly. So that's where I think that one came from Gay's Line Farm, if I remember researching that one,
Okay.
where that big kitty came from. But yeah, so it is neat to kind of connect the dots. And like I said, these trainers would have had to work with her very closely because, she couldn't get near a big cat without the safety issues. She had to be very attentive with these trainers. so that everybody was safe in the process of it.
Were any stars ever harmed? Because in Kevin Brownlow's Hollywood the Pioneers documentary, Gloria Swanson talks about how she insisted it be a real lion that
Yeah.
kind of has its paws on her back,
Yeah.
her bare back. And she said DeMille was literally sitting off camera with a gun
Yeah.
ready to shoot in case the lion attacked her.
Yeah.
So, like, were there any cases where this
Remember
like,
Sparrows, where Mary Pickford's got the kids going over alligators?
Right?
And Douglas Fairbanks nearly lost his mind over that scene. And
Did they ever have any kind of like OSHA or like safety regulations?
I think we had the safety as much. But with that said, though, yeah, the safety always did come first. And a lot of these animals, a lot of these lions have been handled from day one. It's not like they just went to the wild and brought a big lion and expected it to sit on top of Gloria Swanson.
Okay. So
These are very well handled. But then, like I said, she was probably well trained before even getting in the same room with the lion. So she probably already had her cues.
Okay.
A lot of it's cues, a lot of it, what would be her safety things. She didn't feel comfortable or something. So there was a lot of pre-work that would have led up to it. But you're right, it had to be a real lion back then. It was authentic. It was, these animals worked hard then.
Yeah. I always worry about horses because when you see a lot of the old westerns, you wonder how these horses handle all these falls, all these accidents. And I've heard some horror stories about some movies and some assistant directors or directors.
There are the horror stories you don't want to get into, but I always didn't say, I think because of those few movies actually in the silent era is why we had the humane officers so early on set. So like I said, this isn't something where just today now we have human officers that are sitting, or humane officers sitting at, on set. This started as soon as we heard a lot of that, because even then people didn't want to hear about how these animals were hitting their demises in these movies. So it was bad press for these studios. So they didn't want to keep doing anything harmful. Just like the fixers of the people in the studio system, it was the same with something. And just like I think today's standards, people get more upset if you hear something happen to an animal than a human being. It was the same even back then. So it was bad press for them. That's why we've heard even to this day these bad stories, because they heard about it back then. So getting the humane officers that early on, I think, was very impressive, that the studio system was smart to make sure that this doesn't get repeated. And because it's bad press for them and bad PR.
Oh, absolutely.
So that problem got fixed pretty quick.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
But yeah.
Well, since it is spooky season, as I mentioned, we talked about some movie picks, including Cat People and Curse of the Cat People. Are there any other favorite spooky themed movies that you would like to recommend to people?
Oh boy.
Because there's so many great ones. I mean, tons of great ones.
Yeah, I mean, I still just always, Bride of Frankenstein's always my favorite,
Turns 90 this year.
I know, so Bride of Frankenstein's always on our list. Oh, what's the one? It's more of a New Year's Eve, the carriage.
Phantom Carriage.
Phantom Carriage, thank you.
That's a good
I'll
one.
still end up watching that usually around Halloween, even though it's more of a holiday movie, but that's one of my favorites too. And yeah, there's always kind of those ones that you repeatedly watch. I can always watch Creature anytime. I mean, even though it's not really Halloween, it's those fun suspense. Yeah.
My birthday is Halloween night, and a few years ago, the New Beverly showed Freaks, and I went down there with a friend for my birthday, and the manager of the theater got up and had the whole theater sing happy birthday to me before Freaks. And I told him, I go, it is never going to be that good for me ever again. Like nothing will ever top that, because I love that movie. I love that theater. So that was really, really cool.
Well, my little niece, when she was here a few years back, she was only like 4. I made her watch Freaks, and she loved it. They had the horses, like they don't know the whole story, but it is still such a beautiful movie, and it is very entertaining to be able to watch. And I think that was probably one of my very first horror movies I think I ever watched was Freaks.
Oh, wow. Mine was a Dracula. I saw it before my birthday when I was about 6, I think, and that was the movie that is why I'm sitting here today. It made me fall in love with movies. And every Sunday they had the horror movie matinee. I think it was Channel 13. So if I did not fight with my brother and I was good in school, then I could watch the horror movie matinee. And that's where I saw Dracula, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolf Man, The Mummy, all that stuff. That was like the big gateway drug that put me on my path, really.
And I love ravens and crows. So like
Oh yeah.
any, especially Jimmy the Raven, who was a famous raven in a lot of Capra movies, a lot of Columbia movies. So even if they're not horror, just to have ravens in some of these movies, I always like to watch anything with Jimmy. But then of course you also had the Raven movie, and it's all fun. I love it.
I've always heard ravens are very intelligent
Yeah,
creatures.
they're almost up there with dolphins as it goes for intelligence level. I
Oh,
think they say they have a brain education of about a 2 or 3 year old. So, and very
wow.
smart.
That is
And
so
I think they're
cool.
smart from puzzle perspective, because again, they have to be creative how to get food and be out there in the wild. So, they've shown where you could take ravens and make a whole puzzle system for them to even get their food, and they'll figure it out within a minute of how to do it.
Wow.
Whether it's taking a straw and pushing a button, like they're that creative, which is very impressive. Which also is why they do great with training and movies and television. However, you do run into certain situations in the United States where like ravens and crows are considered migrating birds, which means legally you can't even use them in films and movies and television shows. So a lot of the ravens and crows you do see are actually either hybrids or they're like African ravens that usually have a white chest, but they darken them to make them look all black. So there's always those little interesting little tidbits too. Just because you're in the movie business doesn't mean you get to go against any laws when it comes to animals here in the United States. So it's interesting when it comes to like ravens and crows and everything, how they have to be a hybrid breed or they have to be like an African raven or something that lines to. So usually if you see a commercial with ravens or a movie with ravens, they probably have a white chest that they just blackened.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. So you can't use any migratory birds in movies or television.
Let me ask you this too. Are there certain kind of animals that are, or breeds rather, that are more trainable than others? Like for example, I've always been a Labrador person.
Yeah.
Labs are pretty obedient, pretty focused, you know. Like, are they a more trainable breed than, say, a Chihuahua or a Dalmatian or a Husky?
When you're an animal trainer in the industry, actually the first thing you look at is color. Because black animals don't necessarily always do that good on screens. So that's why you don't see a lot of, even today's standards, you don't see a lot of black lab. You always see a lot more of the whiter colored
Mhm.
animals, because they come over better on screen than a lot of the
Okay.
darker animals. As it goes for trainability, not really. I'm seeing a lot more mixed breeds
Okay.
being utilized. And that's why you always see a lot more movies where it's just like a cute, scruffy little terrier or something, because a lot of times those mixed breeds tend to be even easier to train. Challenges trying to find pairs that look the same, so usually you got to match the hybrids a little bit and the mixed breeds a little bit on it. But then it also depends on what you're training. So, like if you are doing like a horror movie today, or like The Walking Dead, when you had, the famous dog in that movie, that was a Malinois, which is they can be trained to be aggressive on demand.
Mm.
And that takes a whole special breed and a whole special trainer to be able to
Oh
do
yeah.
versus, standard poodle, would be a different thing. And standard poodles are starting to make their comeback a lot with commercials and kind of luxury lifestyle. You want that standard poodle, and they're very easy to train, but that takes a whole different trainer than somebody that's got to have a dog that can be aggressive, safely and on cue. So
Okay.
different breeds kind of get used to different things, but the hardest thing is just making sure you always have pairs because you don't want to overwork an animal either.
Kind of like little kids. I heard they
Exactly.
get identical twins a lot
Exactly.
because they could
Yep,
switch
same
out the
thing.
kids.
Our
And
friend that's been an animal trainer, one of the training ranches up there in Santa Clarita, you walk in, there's multiples of everything. He's got black cats, he's got 6 of them, so you can always rotate them out. And, he does like the State Farm, like the emu.
oh,
So, the exotics don't end with just a big cat. It's all these interesting species. And,
oh
it just
yeah.
takes the right behavior. It's all behaviors, learning, and being able to doesn't mean you need a college degree or anything. You just need to be able to read behavior to work on the movie sets of these animals.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been a fun
Yeah.
discussion. And again, thank you to everybody who's watched Hollywood Kitchen and all this time and been
Yeah,
supportive.
congratulations on the
Thank you.
milestone.
I do have a Patreon if anybody wants to contribute. All proceeds from it help to buy cookbooks and ingredients. And sometimes I have to make these several times to make sure I actually know what I'm doing. So it all gets put to good use.
And if you're in Los Angeles on Thursday, come and see us at Natural History Museum.
yes, and I will post a link online and on the Facebook page and on the Hollywood Kitchen website.
So fantastic. Yeah, this is very yummy. Freshy.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Angie, and thanks to everybody who's watching. Stay tuned for more food, fun, and film history from Hollywood Kitchen.